All right, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Have attention, please. Yeah, sometimes, don't make me regret. Don't make me regret. Yeah, sometimes the other class gets a little bit, blah, 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 blah. So I'm just doing this class this time to see. What? No. I'm not going to show favoritism. You don't get to sit in the fancy chair. Oh, okay. You are the first one to ask. I'm the first one to tell you. Sorry. Unless everyone is like, you can get like, Lizzie, oh my gosh, you guys are, unless everyone, if they object, because actually that came up in one class because somebody just grabbed it, didn't ask for permission, and so we kind of put it to a vote, and one person said no. So that's the way it was. No, I mean, do you guys, well, you're sitting all the way over here.
I vote that our dictatorship happens.
All right, never mind. This is going to take too much time and so forth. If you can get a petition to me next time, signed by everybody in the class, that says you get to sit in the comfy chair, then you can. But it needs to be unanimous. No. That's an interesting governmental subject matter, but no. Okay? All right, here we go. Ladies and gentlemen, go ahead and take your notes out. We're going to be continuing with Russia. And we'll take it all the way up through Peter the Great, maybe a little bit more. Last period we didn't get, we got through most of Peter the Great. And some of the students were like, wow, I remember covering this a bit last year in the 9th grade. We covered some of Russia, which always helps when you build on things that you know. And as part of this Russia overall unit, very, very helpful. Yes. Reminder, you guys are here all week. Okay? Next week, how often are you here? 3 times this week? How many next week?
2.
0. Wow, they're not coming at all. You're coming here twice?
Yeah.
It's a break. It's break. Then, following week, you guys come here twice. And then the week after that, you come here 3 times. Although, I don't know if you're taking the PSAT, I guess, for you guys. Then you would be coming in, like 4, yeah, because that's going to be on Thursday. I'm not in charge of all of that, but on one of the green days, we got the PSAT. So, now, I've handed you something that I want you to turn your attention to. The election prediction, 2020 presidential election prediction, extra credit opportunity. Have that in front of you. I'm going to explain this to you. I'll explain to the folks at home too, because we'll make this available through Google Classroom. And this is an opportunity that comes along every 4 years, and it encourages students to do what I always do, which is pay very close attention to a presidential election and the likely outcome and how it's going to play out and so forth. This is educational in the sense that we've got 2 candidates for president, and sometimes people think, they don't pay any attention, that if you get the most votes of voters across the country, you win. If that was the case, who would be president right now? Wrong. Wrong. Thank you. 3rd time's a charm. Hillary Clinton, who came in first in the popular vote 4 years ago. But what did you need to have? Most electoral votes. Who had the most electoral votes? Trump. Okay? So that's how it works. It's part of that compromise. We saw a little bit of that last year when we did the Constitutional Convention, and the big states and the little states compromise so that, okay, in Congress, the Senate, each state will get 2, but the big states get more representation in the House. And so this is how the electoral system works for president, okay? The presidential election and all the other elections are taking place 1 month from tomorrow. Got that? Now, some people have already voted because ballots are going around the country. Not as many people this year as a percentage of the voters are going to be voting on Election Day. A lot more people are going to be voting absentee ballot, are going to be voting by mail, and so forth. I mean, it tends to be safer and preferable for a lot of voters that don't want to take a chance. So I don't know how much impact like the last week or 2 of the campaign is going to have this time around as compared to, say, 4 years ago or 8 years ago or 12 years ago and so forth. Having said that, there is one person who has some diminished ability to actually go out on the campaign trail right now. Unless you've been under a rock, you don't know that Donald Trump has COVID, President Trump has COVID, and he's in the hospital right now. I've been following this story very closely, and there has been interesting things. One, it's like, well, he's going to be released today, he's going to go back to the White House. That may happen. Others are like, well, we're looking at treatment, and that's pretty serious treatment. So we'll see how it plays out. In any event, there may be some potential restriction on his campaign activities, although in today's modern age, can you campaign from a building to lots of people outside of Washington, D.C.? Yeah. Sure you can, yeah.
If one of them were to die, would the other one just get
It's an interesting question because people have been asking those and so forth. We've never had it in our country where, like, right before an election, somebody who is about to win a presidential election dies. Okay, we've never had that. Closest we ever came to that is number 9, President William Henry Harrison. He was elected, took the oath of office, died within about a month of pneumonia. Right? It does get interesting, complicated. Here's my quick answer on that. You ready? The Republican Party selected Donald Trump as their nominee and Mike Pence as the vice presidential nominee. So the Republican Party, if need be, if something terrible were to happen to Trump so that he couldn't be the nominee, then I think they would, shuffle things around and do whatever, and potentially Pence would be, the presidential nominee. They could even do that after the election is held. Send the word out to the people who were chosen as electors. Here's who we want you to vote for on the ballot. Maybe that would occur. Interesting questions. A lot of that is sort of unknown territory because we've never had that actually happen in our country before. Okay? It may be moot because if Biden gets the majority of the electoral votes, then it doesn't really matter what's going on the Republican side.
So, would, if Trump died, that would make Pence the president?
If it occurred after, for the current term, yes.
So then,
Yeah.
does it affect
The next election.
right?
Again, my answer goes to who are the nominees of the Republican Party. If
So it doesn't just totally bypass it?
no. The only way it would kick in again is like if the next president sworn into office on January 20th, 2021 were to die, then that person would be replaced by the vice president. We've already got that in our Constitution. That's how it works, and it's worked that way for quite some time. All right, so take a look at this. This is the extra credit opportunity. Some of you guys are already, I can see, I'm looking at Gabe's. He's doing research there. He's like, I'm going to get a head start on this. You know what? And actually, you can get a pretty good head start on this one because the easy ones are easy, right? The tricky ones, you want to take full advantage of the time that I give you. Turn this in on Election Day. It's a blue day. Yes, it is. Otherwise, for the green day, those guys should turn it in like on the Monday, November the 2nd. Okay? At home, make sure I get it by email, an attachment, what have you, so that I can see. And you can get, potentially up to 10 if you run the table and get all of them right. So here's how it works. Take a look. We'll read through there and I'll explain some various different things that are going on here. And in fact, looking at Gabe's screen, I got one right here for you. I wonder if it's the same one. Not that one, this one. This is the 270 to win. There are several different websites that follow the polling information that will give helpful information. This is updated regular. I think this is updated as of today, based on polls that are taken in different states and so forth. Okay? So, take a look here. I'll read it. Write the number of electoral votes in the column of the presidential candidate who you predict will win those votes for each of 56 contests. You're like, 56 contests? As you'll see when we go through, 48 of the 50 states, it's winner take all. So for example, if you think Alabama is going to go for Trump, what number would you write in the Trump column? All 9. If you think Biden is going to win that, don't split them up. You will get 0 extra credit points if you split them up. It's all or nothing. In fact, that's why on the 2 states, Maine and Nebraska, that don't do it that way, I set it up so that you can follow along the way they do it. So if you look at Maine, go down about 2/3 of the way in the first column. Maine, instead of the winner takes the entire state's electoral votes of 4, they break it out into 1st congressional district, 2nd congressional district. In fact, look over on the back, the little map that I have there. You'll see I actually tried to draw the line between the 1st and 2nd districts in Maine. And then whoever gets the 1st gets 1. Whoever gets the 2nd gets 1. Whoever comes in 1st in the state of Maine gets the other 2. So it's possible, I'm guessing, that Biden will get all, or at least 3 out of 4. Because I think he's going to win Maine, so he gets 2 for that. And then he may win one of the congressional districts, whereas Trump might get the other one. Or maybe they all go that way. Nebraska, take a look at Nebraska. I tried to draw the 3 congressional districts on the map. Like one of them, the 1st congressional district, is really small, at least as far as geography. It's got a lot of people in it. It's the city of Lincoln. That's the largest city in the state of Nebraska and where the University of Nebraska is. That's the one that's reflected on this map as being sort of brown, as in too close to call. Biden might win that university town, whereas the rest of the state, which is more rural, they tend to be more supportive of Trump. So Trump could either get 4 out of 5 of the Nebraska votes or 5 out of 5. But don't worry about it, because when you do this, and you'll have to be particular, you'll need to put the correct number. So like, let's say, maybe you say Biden gets Nebraska's first CD, but then Trump gets the 2nd, the 3rd, and then he gets the 2 for overall victory. Does that kind of make sense? Yeah.
Why are some of them lighter and some of them darker?
Good question. I'll put it out to you guys. Anybody know? Go for it, Gabe.
So like the light red is obviously kind of, it's not fully Republican, it's kind of leaning
Yeah.
towards the middle, like the brown, the is the middle.
Yeah, brown is like too close to call. Dark blue is solid demo. Dark red is solid Trump or Republican. And then the lighter one is leaning to Biden, in this case for the blue. Or so does that make sense? So it's actually a clever way of doing the map because it shows kind of a gradient. So for you guys, when you do the research on this, I don't expect there to be much movement of the really solid reds and blues. That's like, that's like the 30 that are really, really easy to do. Idaho, Utah, Wyoming, North Dakota, South Dakota, Oklahoma, Arkansas, Louisiana, Mississippi, Alabama, Tennessee, Kentucky, South Carolina, West Virginia, Alaska. Those are pretty solid Trump ones. Although if you look, it doesn't only add up to maybe about 77. If you look at the solid ones for Biden, then you're already getting a big lead there because you got like New York and California in the mix. And that adds up pretty quickly. Okay? So you add up the columns. Whoever gets 270 or more wins. And then you also do the color. So on the back, you've got a little coloring project to do. And you can do it traditionally with blue states for Joe Biden and red for Donald Trump. And then you can kind of break up like Nebraska if you think that, Biden is going to carry the one thing. And then I've got a little square for like the overall for the state, and as I do over here for Maine. Anyway, if you want to use a different color, just indicate like that you're using a different color for Biden or a different color for Trump. It's totally up to you. When I was your age, it wasn't a clear red and blue for Republican and Democrat. That still hadn't sort of like set in place. Now it's very much set in place, but you can do something different. Use those sites. Make sure you get it in by no later than Tuesday, November 3rd. Obviously, I really can't accept it after that because we'll be already adding up the vote totals beginning on Election Day. It might take a little longer this year. Just because of the newness of doing vote by mail in many different states that haven't really done that before. So it might take a little longer on some of the states, but we'll give you all of your deserved extra credit points in time for the end of the semester. Questions? There, you guys get it? All that sorted out? Okay, good. All right. By show of hands, what does this map tell you right now? What is the state of the election right now?
Biden is winning.
Yeah, this is the key 270 mark. If Biden gets all of those blue states, and significantly like Pennsylvania, Michigan, Wisconsin, Trump carried those states 4 years ago. 20, 16, 10, that's a fair chunk of electoral votes. If you have all those in Biden's column to begin with, Biden's got it. How many of you guys think Biden will win the election? How many of you guys think Trump will win the election? He'll make a comeback as compared to this. A lot of things going to happen in 4 weeks' time. And of course, an interesting thing, 4 years ago, there were more expectations that Hillary was going to win. Not just the popular vote, but actually the electoral vote. But she lost, particularly right in here, she lost some critical states that were very close. And sometimes the margin was really, 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 really close. There's always going to be some states where the margin's really, really close. If Texas is the state where the margin's really, really close, forget it. Trump's lost. I mean, Texas is a huge state, and it goes Republican almost all the time. 38 electoral votes. Yeah, well, I mean, yeah, there's a variety of various different things and so forth that you look at. Ohio is usually always very close, and Florida, and they're still listed. Georgia, that's usually a Republican state, but is listed as very close. According to this particular site, when you do comparisons, you'll see various different things. Okay? Should be fun. Yeah, I know you're allowed to play around with it and so forth as you do your various different predictions. Okay. Questions, comments? Oh my gosh. Yes. You should do that before you come. Take care of business. Take care of business. All right. Now, actually, last we left off, we were talking about Cossacks. Okay? Cossacks. Cossacks are, of course, those Russian pioneers that help spread Russian influence, Russian culture, Russian population from west to east, all the way, and in your notes you've got it as Siberia and every other point in the east that the Russians settle into. Think of them as sort of like Russian cowboys. So to compare, say, the United States of America with the spread from east to west, and the populating of the American West with settlers. And of course, those settlers have the army to help back them up, and some of those cowboys have got some basis of experience there too. Cossacks. I did decide, take a look here. I've got this, and I was thinking, oh, should I show it? Should I show it? I'm going to show it. Because I think it really, really helps to see on a map how Russia plays out. So take a look here. I've got it a little bit faster speed. I'll pause it a couple of times so that you can see kind of how Russia ebbs and flows over time. Keep in mind, I like the fact that this particular video of the map has the modern boundaries. So you can see Kiev and Rus. Part of that early Russia actually is contained in Ukraine today and Belarusia, and then the main part of Russia there. Okay? So you ready? We're going to see it ebb and flow over time. This is during the time of Vladimir. There it grows, doing pretty well. Oh my gosh, wow. Things are doing well. Look at that. What happened? It disappeared. Mongols, exactly. So now we're going to see it pop up again in Moscow, referred to as Muscovy. Eventually, I refer to it as like Russia 2.0. Starts up here a little bit more to the north, and it also will spread. The second incarnation of Russia, you'll never see it completely obliterated as it was during the time of the Mongols. There you see it spreading. Now you see it moving to the east. What's going to stop it as Russia moves to the east? Like not much. Wrong direction. France is going to be to the west. I mean, how far across this way is it going to go? The whole way. What do you call that territory up here in the northern part of Russia? Siberia. Pause right here. Mongolia, modern day Mongolia, right there. They're never going to be like officially part of Russia so much, but right in here, all of this area. And in fact, if you were to have the map continue over, at some point you'll see Alaska being part of Russian control. Take a look here. You'll see Russians expanding there over time, also into Central Asia. and then over here in two-part European parts. Now, notice this, and you're going to be putting this in your notes later on. As they expand into areas that aren't Russian, you're going to have a challenge for the Russians. It's going to be a domestic security challenge. What do you do? You have a lot of people that aren't like you, now they're part of your country. Got to figure something out. I mean, like what happened to the Native American population as they became part of the United States of America? Overwhelmed with lots of new people moving in of the national group. So you're going to see Russians moving into some of these areas, sometimes overwhelming, sometimes not. We'll see that. So there we go into the 17th century. Now this is about as far as we got last year when we talked about Russia. We didn't get much beyond 1750 or so. This particular map is going to take us through, and in fact we'll get to that today. We got Peter the Great. We'll cover him taking into the Baltic Sea, spreading into the, we'll see Catherine the Great. It's going to expand some Russian territory down to the south. And Russia is, at its height, going to be quite big, as will the Soviet Union. Lot of territory. They even took Finland for a while. Oh, there's Napoleon. Oh, that didn't last very long. Oh, taking over some Polish territory. We'll get to that. Not today. Now we... What's that? Yeah, I know. I noticed that. I'm like, what the heck? That's weird. But I don't know. I didn't make this video. Eventually they'll go back to, there you go, Russian Empire. And then, of course, what happens in 1917? Yeah, Soviet Union. There's first Soviet flag. And then there's the more familiar Soviet flag with the hammer and sickle and the star. And all of this, and they're going to take over the Baltic states as well. We'll tell that story as part of this unit. Here's Germany taking over some territory briefly during World War II. And then, if this map were to be totally accurate, they really should color all of this area in because that's going to be Soviet occupied. I don't know why they just colored these two little parts in. But yeah, Soviet occupied East Europe, absolutely for sure, during the last part of during the Cold War. And there you have the map today. One of the students was like, "What's that going over there?" That actually is part of Russia. It's called Kaliningrad, and yeah, it's part of Russia today. And these other countries are all independent countries. So we'll be looking at that as we go forward. Did that help a little bit? Give a little bit of a visual sense of kind of how things are going to be playing out as we look at the history of Russia. Yeah? Da? Yes. Da. If you say no in Russian, how you say no in Russian? Nine is German. Нет. Нет. Yes. Нет. How do you say goodbye in Russian? До свидания. I don't know too many more. Thank you, I think it's спасибо. Because I remember learning that when I went to Russia first time. Спасибо? Yeah, there you go. That works perfect. All right. Now, on the handout, I know some of the bullet points and so forth here. We've got, yeah, here we go. The third bullet point, we have the Tsar, and I want you to make note, do not write down all the names of these people. This is the Romanov dynasty. Write in your notes. The Romanov dynasty was the family of rulers, and Ivan the Terrible wasn't in there. I can't give you all the details and so forth, but anyway, his family, I don't know, maybe there was something in the family that just didn't work out for the health and well-being and continuation of that family. I don't know, killing your son is probably not a good way to keep the crown in your family, but in any event, beginning in the year 1613, you will have the Romanovs in charge, so you still have the powerful Tsar position, and some of these Tsars we'll talk about, not all of these, but some of these we'll talk about in great detail as examples of powerful Tsars, powerful autocratic rulers that the Russians looked to as, yeah, they understood the job, and they did it. Did they expand freedom, democracy, things like that? Not so much, but they're going to have a grasp of challenges like national security challenge, economic social satisfaction, domestic security challenge. Okay? It goes all the way to 1917. What happened to last Tsar, Nicholas II? He dead. Yeah, he got killed. Actually, he quit the job, never got out of the country, which was too bad. If he had, he would have lived a lot longer than he did. Eventually, the communists got hold of him and his family, and he got killed. More on that later. We're going to jump right into, you ready? Peter the First, a.k.a. Peter the Great. Now, I have him 1672 to 1725. This one has him 1682, 1725. I suppose mine reflects that he's the ruler when he's much younger, even though his older sister is in charge. But then eventually, he's like, I think he's like 16, 17 years old. He's like, oh, older sis, step aside. I'm taking charge now. I'm the Tsar. So he does. He sends his sister aside, right? Because they didn't want to allow. Oh, you're like, will they ever allow a woman to rule Russia? Yeah, not too long after that. Yeah, Catherine the Great is going to be coming in. And, yeah. Wait a minute. No, actually, Catherine the Second right here is Catherine the Great. Yeah, right in here. Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Peter the Third. Yeah, because he was not as strong of a ruler. No, wow, you're... Okay. Yeah, wow. The guy just got stabbed and poked to death. You know, give him a break. But anyway, yeah, so let's focus our attention first on Peter the Great. Peter the First, the Great. And if you look at him, you'll notice a couple of things. It's like, is he Russian? Yes, he's Russian. Does he act like Russian? Yes, he acts like Russian. Is he going to act like other things? Well, I'll tell you what. Some of you guys recall some of the notes on Peter the Great, and I'm going to reiterate them as well for you guys right here. Peter the Great was smart. Boom. And tough. And he had a wicked sense of humor. He was really good at, like, military combat. He's going to have some key victories, which we'll talk about. He's also really good at, like, engineering and, like, science and technology types of things, too. Very interested and actually pretty darn good at it. But he really ultimately, like, fits into that position of being a very powerful ruler of Russia who understands to run the country, you need to face the challenges. And one of the biggest challenges he knew that Russia faced is their Western neighbors. The Western neighbors, and I mean Europe. Now, it's interesting at the time because eventually we're going to see some very powerful European countries cause all sorts of problems for Russia. Germany, France, but the real challenge that Peter the Great faced during his lifetime was from Sweden. And you're like, Sweden? Really? During those days, Sweden packed a punch. I mean, it was like Viking 2.0. They had a whole thing going on up there in Scandinavia, and they controlled a lot of territory, including parts of Norway at times, and Finland, and also this area around the Baltic Sea, right in here. Peter the Great would go to war with Sweden. And it was in Russia's national security, he believed, that he beat Sweden. And he will. The Great Northern War, there you go. Put that in your notes, the Great Northern War, Russia under Peter the Great versus Sweden. Don't have to give you all the names of the people involved there. But he saw that it was very important that they beat Sweden. And part of it was to get land. Not just any land, but look, here on the map. This land. Right here. What's so great about that land that I just pointed to? Yes?
But just make sure you point out the green thing between the purple and the white.
Yeah. What about this blue thing is the water?
Yeah.
What is that water? Because they got lakes and rivers in Russia. I mean, good grief. The Baltic Sea? Who cares about the Baltic Sea? Write that down. The Baltic Sea. Why is the Baltic Sea important? It is important. Why is it important? The other parts of the earth from there? That's a nice way of putting it. You can get to the other parts of the earth. It's kind of like, I like freeways because once I get on a freeway, I can get to the other parts of the United States of America. That's exactly it. If you look at this map, if you get to the Baltic Sea, actually here, You still got to make your way through Denmark and Sweden. So, you know, you got to make sure that those guys aren't messing with you. But once you get out here, you're in the Atlantic Ocean. And once you get out into the Atlantic Ocean, you can go to the South Atlantic Ocean, you can go to the Indian Ocean, you can go to the Pacific Ocean. You can go all over the place. That's what Peter the Great wanted. He wanted that land so that he could put a new city, a port city. He actually made it even his capital city. What was the name of his new capital city he built right there? St. Petersburg. Very good. Although it's interesting because if you look back, if you look a little bit more closely at this map, the Russians actually did have access to the Arctic Ocean before they had the Baltic Sea. So isn't that good enough? I mean, the Arctic Ocean is connected to all the seas and so forth, too. What's the problem with that? It's freezing. It's actually frozen solid for, especially that time of history, for many months of the year, like the winter months. So he wants, make sure you put this down, a warm water port. Although I tell you what, the Baltic Sea is not that warm. But it is free of ice pretty much most of the year. Got that? Very significant. If you want to be a strong country, you need to be able to trade. You want to be able to trade, you want to have access to the water. You want to be able to have a navy. Why was that important? He wanted his country to be strong. What else is he going to do to make sure his country is strong? He's going to learn. He's going to learn. It was kind of like, you know, he observed what had been taking place in the hundreds of years before he came to power. He looked at the situation in Russia. He looked at what he could pick up on what was going on in Western Europe, and he's like, man, those guys are way ahead of us. You know, some people theorize, oh, well, maybe it has something to do with the Mongols, and it was almost like when the Mongols were in town and they were in charge, it was like, you know, they kicked everybody out of school for like 200 years. And so Russia was behind. You can write that down. Russia was behind, technologically, educationally, scientifically, to Western Europe. And to be honest, a lot of other parts of the world were behind Western Europe. I mean, Western Europe during this time period is getting ready, and actually they already have busted out. I mean, they've taken over the Americas and other parts of the world, and so, but Peter the Great is kind of like, these guys are my neighbors, and I need to be able to keep on par with those guys. And if I can't get my country up to snuff, then we are going to be in a really bad situation with them. Because if you go to war with them, I mean, what happens if two countries go to war and one is more advanced technologically than the other?
The more advanced one wins.
Why?
Real specific, Connor.
Oh, the weapons and weapons, you know. You can be like smartphoning each other, you know, all you want, but if one of them's got like super, like modern weapons, boom. Very good point. You guys are picking up on that because that is a very, very important point. So here's what Peter the Great does. He wants to make sure, and I've told you this before, I told you last year, some of you guys are like, I remember this part. He wants to make sure about what's going on. Shipbuilding, port facilities. He wants to see how it's done because he's going to have that going on in his country. So what does he do? Send people out to go find out what's going on? No, he does it himself, right? Remember the whole incognito thing? He's like, he shows up, he does the official visits as the czar, and he visits different countries, but he also tries to go, at least, incognito, going to, you know, Dutch and British dockyards and shipbuilding facilities and so forth to see how it's done. I mean, the guy is just like a sponge. He absorbs it all in, and he brings back people to Russia to help build up his shipbuilding facilities and his port facilities to make his country strong. And is that important in the legitimacy of his government and for his country? Yes. National security. It's all about national security, national security, national security. Although, keep in mind, I mentioned this before, when he takes over these areas, in your notes you've got them listed as Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania. Do you see the bullet points there? Like, oh my gosh, Mr. Hansen makes such a fuss over people on the Baltic Sea. Yes, I do. Okay? And when the Russians took them over, they're like, oh, here come the Russians. And literally, write that down, here come the Russians. Why would Peter the Great and subsequent rulers want Russians to move into that area? What, can't he trust non-Russians to be loyal to him? No, sometimes the Russian leaders are like, I much prefer having Russians there. They're much more likely to be loyal to me. Right? It's called Russification. I got it listed as a bullet point much further down, but I perhaps should have put it a little bit further up because that starts during that time period. Bring in the Russians. Bring in the culture. Bring in the nation. Bring in the language. Will that work entirely? Will all of a sudden all these areas that Russia conquers become Russian? Not necessarily. Because when we eventually look at the map and see when Russia is ultimately all that's left of the Soviet Union, there's going to be a fair amount of territories off of their border that are independent countries, like Ukraine, Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania, even though you actually have a fair number of Russians in there. Okay? Good. So he comes, he learns, well done, Peter the Great. This one is actually kind of, I don't know, it's just sort of interesting. Peter the Great associated the West with advancement, with the West with superior technology, and that's all fine and so forth. But yeah, I mean, but in his mind, he's like, all those cultural aspects of the West must also therefore be better than what he referred to was going on back in Russia as being sort of like antiquated and hick and just sort of eh. And so this is why when he came back, he's like, I want to make Russia into like a Western country. It's called Westernization. It's one of the things going on there. And so culturally, he would come back and he'd look at these Russian men and say, oh, your beards are so old, they're so out of fashion, and he would force himself and have beards cut off. This is also part of the personality of the Russian leader. Remember, sometimes you get these really powerful leaders who have military accomplishments and they do well with national security, and then you get the other stuff too, right? For Peter, it was sort of like maybe not as damaging as, I don't know, Ivan the Terrible flipping out on his son and having him killed and so forth. You know, take your pick. We'll see some other examples of some very powerful rulers who their little like side things are going to be very dangerous to much of the population. Here, I guess it's dangerous to somebody's hairstyle. He cuts their beards off, or he cuts the tails off of their long coats. Or when he builds his capital city, right, St. Petersburg, he builds it in a Western style. Oh, can I get a job here in New St. Petersburg? I want to build some onion dome cathedrals and buildings with Russian style No. He uses Western style architecture, as in like Western European style architecture. There is his winter palace in the heart of St. Petersburg. If you go there today, it's the Hermitage. It's a great art museum with all kinds of amazing artwork that was purchased from various different places by various different czars. Also in the basement, there might be some things that were gathered from various different Russian armies as they went through different parts of Europe. Yeah. For that, if you got a flat roof, you need to make sure that the roof gets shoveled. I mean, that's about it. How many of you guys got flat roofs? Flat-ish roof? I mean, if you got an onion dome or some really steep pitched building like they do have a lot of those in Russia, I mean, that works great for getting the snow off. But if you use some of the architectural styles in some of the other places, yeah, you're going to need to make sure to get that stuff cleared off, because otherwise it could build up too much pressure. And the least you're going to have is like leaky roofs. The worst you could have is like a collapse. Yeah, I don't know if you guys remember Snowmageddon.
Oh yeah, that was so much fun.
Yeah, it took away like a good big chunk of our February break. And there were some buildings that collapsed because of it, because of the heavy snow. Yeah. Yeah.
We got a long
Good times. Good times.
We had like 10 snows in a row.
Yeah. Oh, I remember that. It's like, get up, no school, shovel driveway, repeat. You know. Yeah, I still did. Good for you. All right. All right, now the Summer Palace. You remember the Summer Palace? Do you guys remember the Summer Palace? Lizzie, do you remember the story about the Summer Palace? This is just, no. This was fashioned on Versailles. Versailles was Louis XIV, King of France, the absolute monarch for France, and he had this big, huge, massive palace and big, huge, massive gardens and so forth. And yes, Peter the Great visited it. And he's like, yeah, I will have one of those. I will have two of those. I have Winter Palace in St. Petersburg. And then I have Southern Palace just outside of St. Petersburg. Been to both, right? I mean, he's got to have two palaces. I mean, it's Peter the Great. Been some places, not all places. Okay? Yeah, no, it's really, really cool. Who designs fountains? Peter. Yeah, remember that. He designed fountains. Does he know it? Does he understand that stuff? Yeah, he makes it his point to understand it, and so he oversees all of the fountain works and so forth that are going to go in there. Okay? So, beautiful, big house and gardens and wow. And then you have the story of Peter's wicked sense of humor. Okay? Where Peter would have people who are visiting, right? Yeah, remember that? I love that story, right? Where Peter would have and say, oh, you come and visit my palace here. It's very good. Walk this way, step this way. And you're like all excited and so forth, and you're in your finest clothes. And then you step on the trigger stone, which is completely what Peter had intended. You step on the trigger stone, and all of a sudden you get doused with water. And he is laughing his head off. Ha, 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 ha. Oh, you're so mad because you're drenched, but what can you do about it? What can you do about it? You're thinking, well, I'm glad he didn't give me the vodka challenge where he gives you like a 2 or 3 gallon container and goes, drink. Yeah. So yeah, that's Peter the Great. A little bit, yeah. But he's, exactly. And the people look back at him and go, did he solve national security problem? Yes, for a time he did. Did he improve the, yes, for a time he did. Was he tough? Looks like that's what we need for Russia. Tough, powerful people. Somebody asked me in the other class, they're like, when he was off like doing this, who was in charge of Russia? And actually, that's a good question. You need to make sure that when you go off and you're like, doing stuff in the Netherlands and Britain, that you got somebody like making sure that people don't mess around. And to the extent that he was gone and people did mess around, guess what he did when he came home? Nothing? He killed them. He killed them. He killed rebellious people who were trying to overthrow him while he was gone. He had them killed, their bodies nailed to the Kremlin walls. Ho, 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 ho. Huh? He may have, yeah. I wouldn't put that. If you read that, I'm not going to counter that. Because you're like, oh, well, he just designed waterworks and went around and pretending he was incognito, blah, blah, blah. He was tough, too. He fits into the prototype of tough, autocratic Russian rulers. And he is a man who does this. But does that mean that only men can do this? No. Catherine. Who is Catherine? Peter the Third. Yeah, Peter not the Great. Peter the Third. How does Peter the Third get to be ruler? Well, he's from the Romanov family. Let's see. So here we got Peter the Great, 1725. By the time we get to Peter the Third, that's what, 1762? He's only got 1 year in there. That didn't last long. That didn't last long. So, yeah. Catherine was his wife. You can write it down. Catherine was his wife from one of the German, I would say like royal families, because Germany at that time wasn't a big, huge, unified country. So they had lots of different, noble and royal families and so forth. And she came from one of them, and she was married into the royal family of the Romanovs. And who was the more talented of the two? Yeah. I mean, so here's the thing. One of the great, powerful examples of Russian rulers is a woman and a non-Russian, and it's Catherine the Great. I'm going to give you guys those official notes next time. You guys wipe down. We're good to go. Yes.